Today's episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by Growing for Market magazine. Which crops will pay back your investment in a hoop house or greenhouse? How does managing a greenhouse through the winter differ from summer growing? And which crops can just be overwintered in the field? Learn all that and more by subscribing to Growing for Market magazine. The writers are farmers, not journalists. They won't tell you how to grow, they'll tell you how they grow, so you can decide what works for your farm. Growing for Market is celebrating 30 years of helping local food and flower growers succeed with articles written by experienced farmers from around North America. Since 1992, Growing for Market is by farmers, for farmers. Plus, subscriptions start at only $30 per year. Whether you do farmers markets, local wholesaling, a CSA, or dream of starting a farm, check them out today at growingformarket.com. Request a free sample print or digital copy from their website, and podcast listeners can get a new subscriber discount of 25% off with the code WINTER when subscribing at growingformarket.com. I think Growing for Market magazine is an excellent and affordable resource for any grower. Today's show is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds.
Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the Winter Growers Podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, innovative tools, and pertinent information to help feed their families and communities and ensure their growing success. Our 40-acre research farm is the heart of Johnny's, where we trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Our research team is dedicated to finding solutions to the ever-changing challenges growers face, including disease, environmental or insect pressures, and shifting market trends. We invite you to visit the Growers Library at johnnyseeds.com to find technical resources like the Winter Growing Guide, which has tips on planting and harvesting into the shortest days of the year. You can also find variety comparison charts, extensive Jang roller trial results, and more. The employee owners at Johnny's are working hard to make 2022 a great year, and we look forward to growing with you.
Welcome to the Winter Growers Podcast. Today, my guest is Jess Niederer of Chickadee Creek Farm in Pennington, New Jersey. Jess grew up on a family farmland that grew conventional hay and grains for 4 generations, but she was not encouraged as a young adult to consider farming as a career. After attending Cornell University and majoring in ecology, she realized she wanted to be involved in a job that could intersect with the environment, human health, and keeping the family farm active. So sustainable farming seemed like the obvious fit. After learning the ropes from a couple of neighboring vegetable CSA farms, she began Chickadee Creek Farm in 2010, eventually leasing 20 acres of her family's land, and has since grown the operation to 15 acres of production, with all sales being direct marketed to 6 year-round farmers market, a free choice CSA, and an online store. Primary winter crops include fresh spinach, kale, salad mix, which make up about 75% of gross sales, coupled with root and storage crops such as carrots and potatoes. Jess also had twins in 2019 and manages a committed and motivated group of employees on the farm. Her farm is an excellent example of a successful mid-sized year-round operation in the Northeast. Okay, so hello, Jess. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Clara. It's so nice to be here with you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I know we are, at least during this conversation, towards the end of July, kind of busy, crazy summer season. And as a 4-season farm, there's never really a true downtime. So I really appreciate you taking the time now to speak and wondering how's your season going right now?
Our season's been pretty great. This is our 12th year, and I guess by now, most of the hiccups that we can get, we've seen a lot of them before. So it seems pretty average in terms of weather, and our crew has been great. We've had some trouble with hiring this year, which seems to be across the board in the industries. That's what's going on. But we have a lot of people who have been here for a long time, so that's getting us through just fine.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say one of your employees, Kyle, is who recommended that you be a guest on the show. He spoke very highly of you and your operation and, said you would have a lot of great information to offer to listeners. So that's saying a lot that you've got a personal, crew member recommendation there.
Yeah, that was really nice of him. We miss him deeply. He just moved out to Colorado.
Oh,
And
great. Yeah.
yeah, he was both our fastest and sassiest crew member. So it's a tough one to lose both of those characteristics.
Yeah, definitely. Well, good. Well, so you are located in New Jersey and
hmm
your farm is on family farmland. I'd love to learn just a little bit more about your background, your family's farm, how you started, just, kind of give us a lay of the land, so to speak.
Sure, you got it. So I grew up on this farm, which is an 80-acre farm in central Jersey. And I didn't have a lot to do with the farming on the farm as a child or as a, high school age adult. It was a Timothy Hay farm, and then there's a horse boarding stable where people would just pay to keep their horses there, and we'd take care of them. And my dad always had a full-time job in addition to farming. My mom wasn't super involved in the farming tasks. But before that, my grandfather had also farmed on this land, and my great-grandfather as well. So lots of farming in the family, but I was not encouraged to think of farming as a possible career choice moving forward.
Actually, I'm curious why.
Yeah, it was not presented to me as a financially good bet. And so just, farming hay on 80 acres on the side isn't a financially good bet. So I don't think it was inaccurate from, what my parents could see about it. And 80 acres is small for something where you might be talking about row crops and field crops, grain. So, and they hadn't had experience with vegetables or just specialty crops with a higher return. Yeah, so I was told, why don't you be a lawyer? That'd be good. Try to be a lawyer. uh, yeah, so I loved the farm. What a great place to grow up on a farm. It's amazing. What a privilege. But I didn't think that it was something that would work out as a job one day. And I didn't actually know if my parents would be wanting to try to keep a hold of it as they aged. I decided I wanted to farm because I did love ecology and natural resources, studying the environment. That's what I went to school for. But I ended up thinking I would go bonkers in that field because of the frequent lack of connectivity to human society and what people are actually doing in their environment. And agriculture is a pretty good intersection there, where you're outside, you're working with your environment, but in a way that people are going to do. Like people are going to have to grow food, going to have to eat. So it felt like a real opportunity for matching up a bunch of interests that I had. And so I got a job on a vegetable farm, a farm nearby my family farm that looked like they were probably doing okay financially, and worked there to see if it was something that I would want to do. And I ended up loving it so much.
What year was that?
That was 2008. 2008 was my first season farming vegetables, and it was at Honeybrook Organic Farm, which is in the same town that we're in, a very large organic CSA.
And then from there, did you work on another smaller farm before starting your farm?
Yeah, I did. So Honeybrook was cultivating about 60 acres of vegetables when I was working there, and I managed their greenhouse. I did a lot of the transplanting, compost application, but I had actually never harvested anything. Well, I worked at Honeybrook. I think I hopped in and harvested like 5 bunches of radishes while we were doing a wheel change on a tractor once. But I had very little experience with this, just tons of the skills I would have to know if starting my own place. So at the same time as starting my farm, Chickadee Creek Farm, I also worked part-time at another organic farm that at that time was 11 acres of vegetables and did a lot of stuff by hand. They weren't particularly mechanized. So tried to learn those hand tool level skills while also needing to use them on my own place. It sounds kind of insane now that I think about it, to not have gotten more experience first. But I did it that way because my dad was going to let me lease acreage on our family farm, and he had been opposed to it before then. So there was just like a little crack in the armor, and I went for it.
And that was in 2010?
That's right.
And how did you start out then that first year?
So the first thing I did was line up some farmers markets to sell at. So I did 2 farmers markets. And the real blessing about having worked with Honeybrook is that they were right down the road from our farm, and I had a really good relationship with Jim and with Sherry. And they let me borrow anything that I wanted to borrow on Sundays when their crew would not be using it. So it was it was a nice arrangement. I could use their equipment without it interfering with their operation. And I was only doing 2 acres. So the equipment that is sized for 60 acres can make pretty quick work of a 2-acre operation. So it went okay. It was a really busy year working part-time on another farm and trying to, do 2 acres and go to a couple farmers markets at the same time.
And was that just you on your own?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did not know enough to tell other people what to do at that point. It would have been a disaster. I mean, other people started to work on the farm with me the next year, and that was it was still challenging. I was still learning so much myself.
Yeah. Well, I love how you started off with more of the, mechanized approach from the beginning. That's not always common that people do that, but it sounds like since you had access to the equipment, you could do that and really sort of grow your farm very quickly.
Yeah, I really like using tractors for field work. So we're on a 6-foot bed center to center, which is really common here in Jersey. There's a lot of vegetable agriculture in Jersey, and it's basically all on 6-foot centers. So those early years, I bought a lot of used tractors and used implements, often at auctions, and it's already set up for that. For me, that was what I already knew how to do and what I knew I liked. From working at the second farm that I worked at, the smaller one, I don't really love doing things by hand that can be done with a tractor. So it's what I like and what I knew, and it did allow me to grow pretty quickly and be able to handle it with just one body, just my body.
Yeah, and so now you're up to 15 acres of field production. Is that true? And including high tunnels, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that you grew that pretty quickly since 2010. Which is, pretty large scale, obviously, starting off on your own.
Yeah, it didn't feel like quick growth. This is 12 years later, and every year we added just a little bit more. And that addition, there was no grand plan here, to be frank. I thought from business planning, so from making a business plan, that I would probably have to get to at least a 5-acre size to be able to buy the farm one day, afford to live in central Jersey. It's very expensive here. And be able to employ other people and pay them enough so that they'd want to stay. So those were some of the background goals. And 5 acres from the math looked like that would be necessary in order to do that. But every year, the acreage that was added was purely based off of what we could sell, not based off of, keeping to a plan on paper. It was just supply and demand, really. And then we're stopping at 15 because I will go totally batshit crazy if we are any bigger than this. Yeah. So we're there now.
So this feels like kind of the sweet spot with your business and your farm size and everything of what you've reached now.
Yeah, for the moment. It's a pretty static system. So it's the sweet spot for who is working here and who seems to be committed to staying here for the long term, and the money and what I can handle at the moment. But any of that is really subject to change. So I don't want to be too cavalier and say I've figured it all out. But right now is good. hopefully it'll last a while.
So what does that look like for your sales and your markets? How does it all break down with what you have in production?
We are entirely direct market. Wholesaling will not work for our business plan and for what we want to pay people. In addition to that, there's really not much reason to do it. There's 8 million people that live in New Jersey. There are so many people here, and they're enthusiastic and ready to buy things right from a farm. So it's A-okay to just go the direct marketing route for us and anybody else who'd like to join us there. We sell all at farmers markets. We go to 6 per week in the summer, and we go to 6 in the winter as well, though some of them are biweekly instead of weekly. That's year round, of course. We do not sell the week after Thanksgiving or the week after Christmas, and that's basically to give our crew a break. And I mean, last year we moved pretty much $750,000 through those sales outlets. So last year was a crazy busy year because of COVID and because of the interest in local ag from COVID. So we're carefully analyzing our numbers to see what will change moving forward. But so far this year is actually slightly busier. So it seems like it's going to be pretty stable in this way for, at least a few years. We'll see if the interest from customers wears off a little bit as they feel safer.
Does this?
Oh, we have a CSA.
I was gonna say, do you include a CSA or anything?
We do, but it gets lumped in with the farmers market. So our CSA, we have I think 750 members, and they have debit accounts with us. Basically, we give them about a 10% discount for prepaying, and then they draw down from that. And I started that back in 2010, right when the farm started. We had 10 members that first year. It's a pretty common idea now, but I had never heard of it. I read about it in Growing for Market. A farm in Oklahoma had done it and wrote about it. And I thought, well, that's amazing and brilliant. And I didn't really want to directly compete with my mentor's CSA that had 2,500 people in it. And they had more of a traditional share style. That was why we did something a little different. And it's worked out really well for us. And it has basically meant that we can just treat all of our vegetable planning the same, whether it's for market or for CSA. So we don't have to plan in 2 different ways for the different marketing.
Yeah, I mean, 750 members is nothing to feel, I mean, that's a pretty large number for what you're doing. That's amazing. What percentage would you say is CSA members versus just regular customers coming to the markets?
Yeah, so I can talk about that in terms of sales dollars, not in terms of like numbers of customers. So in a typical year, it's 30% CSA and 70% just general, walk-up sales. And the CSA is really walk-up too. They don't get penalized if they don't show up. But, a typical year, 30% CSA, 70% non-CSA sales. But last year was a straight 50-50 split, and that is because we had a lot of new people join, and the people who were already CSA members really doubled down on it. So it was a big CSA year last year.
Do you include any sort of online store too, or is this just farmers market?
Yeah, so when things got really hairy in the Northeast last March of 2020, all of our farmers markets shut down in the same week. We had harvested for them, and then they all said, nope, never mind. So everything shut down, and some of them were faster to get back with it than others. It really depended on the local health departments. And I should say one of them did not shut down. They were outdoors, so they felt like it was a community responsibility to stay open and provide access for people. So we started an online store that day, basically, when we learned everything was shutting down. We started an online store in response. So the first 2 weeks while I was working out the kinks, because I know nothing about doing that, about an online store. Like, as I said, I have a flip phone. I'm not really the greatest person to do the tech stuff, but I'll do it if I have to. And we ended up using local line as the one that we stuck with. And it ended up being 1/2 of all of our sales last year. It's a much smaller percentage this year. but I do not believe we are going to be able to stop using it because so many customers found it to be extremely convenient. So I think that's just a part of our business now.
Yeah. And so those are pre-orders essentially that then someone would pick up at the farmer's market of their choice.
Yeah, that's right. And we did a on-farm pickup while markets were closed. While markets were closed, we did lots of things. We did parking lot pickups from the back of the box truck. Whatever was necessary.
So with 6, farmers markets year round, I know logistically that is a nightmare to manage. How do you manage it?
Yeah, so the only thing that seems maybe a little nightmarish is the staffing. There's not really too much else about it that's difficult other than, getting my payment checks in on time when they're on a different schedule. So with staffing in general, we pay people from the farm who work at farmers markets more. So if you are involved in our marketing team and you're working on our farm, there's basically a commission bonus for doing that. So people who are marketers get paid more. People are assigned a market, and then that is their baby. They take care of their market. They find their own coverage for that market when they can't work it. They are also the people that do all of the harvest requests for that market. So really, I feel like that the management of, or at least the micromanagement of those markets is really taken on individually by the people who work them. So everybody who's working a market is responsible for one of them. So it actually doesn't really feel like too much of a nightmare because we divide and conquer it.
So what does your week look like then in terms of markets, harvests, farm work, et cetera? What would a normal 7-day week look like for you?
Yeah, so Mondays we get to farm. But we also harvest tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, okra, and corn on Mondays. And then Tuesdays we get to farm with no harvesting. It's great. Wednesdays are harvest day. So it's just harvesting all day for 2 markets and for 1/2 of our projected online ordering for the week. And then Thursday is another farming day, but with tomato harvest and flower harvest. And then Friday is a harvest day. So Wednesday, Friday are the big harvest days, except for there's, some of those crops that just need to be harvested more frequently. They get worked in there. And then honestly, not a lot of us are on the farm on the weekend, which is a little tricky sometimes because a lot of us are just at markets for the weekend. We have 2 weekday markets, a Thursday and a Friday, and then we have 2 markets on Saturday and 2 markets on Sunday. There are a lot of people on our farm that have either kids or significant others that have non-farming jobs and have the weekends off. So there's a lot of people who need the weekends for their family and for their personal lives, so are not available to work on weekends.
And yeah, no, I was just going to say, so how many employees do you have total at your farm?
I think right now there are 10. This year's a little, like I can usually say like there are this many, but this year there's a little bit more of like, well, this person's part-time and this person's about to move to Canada. So, but generally 10 in the middle of the summer. And then I'd say we go down to 6 in the winter.
And then you have, I guess, it'd be great to switch into the high tunnels. Yeah. So give me just a description of the numbers of high tunnels you have. Are they heated, unheated? Dive into those details.
Mm-hmm. The central portion of our high tunnel planning are these 4 tunnels that we have that are 30 foot wide by 196 foot long, so about 200 feet long. And that is the length of most of our field beds, too. We try to keep a standard bed length so that our materials are all the same length. So those 4 tunnels, they're Beiler's tunnels from out in Paradise, PA. They're really chunky. It's like 3-inch bows, a lot of bracing, because we have an extremely windy farm. It's so windy here. So we know every year we're going to get 60 mile an hour, 70 mile an hour gusts. It's going to happen all the time. So those tunnels, they have end walls that roll up all the way, and we use our same field equipment right in the tunnels for making beds and spreading compost, spreading amendments. transplanting even when we transplant into them. And direct seeding. We use our tractor-drawn direct seeders in there as well. And we also have some caterpillar tunnels that are made from old nursery hoops. So there was an old nursery auction at one point where a bunch of nursery hoops were sold for $5 each. They're basically made of super rigid electrical metal conduit. And then we set them onto rebar posts and just put them together like any normal caterpillar tunnel, often using the plastic that has ripped off of one of the larger high tunnels to cover them. So that gets repurposed just fine. And we'll make those tunnels we often keep them in the same area of the farm that has some winter wind protection, some protection from wind from the north. But we just put them up at whatever length makes sense for the crop that we're putting in there. Usually we try to at least have them be 150 feet long, just because it's more of a pain in the butt to make an end than a middle. And then we have one 21-foot by 100-foot long tunnel that we put together from two other shorter ones that we took down on a different part of the farm. Early on, I was building hoop houses that were much smaller, both in width and length. So they were 48 foot in length, and we actually took them all down. There were 5 of them that we took down this last winter and then built back up as longer tunnels, because that makes more sense for our scale right now. And we had built up a pretty horrendous soluble salt situation with those early tunnels too. So we were kind of happy to walk away from that and let it get fixed naturally.
And are those all unheated then too?
They are all unheated, and this is a problem.
Okay.
They are. It would be nice to have some supplemental heating, but I don't own the farm. I mean, it already feels a little insane to build all these tunnels on a farm that I don't own. But trenching electricity out to them and installing the heaters and like the propane tank permitting just goes a little bit too far into what I want to do with infrastructure without owning the place.
So then how does that look with your winter production? Walk me through what you would have in those tunnels then through the winter.
Sure. So we do a lot of spinach that often gets relegated to the caterpillar tunnels. The caterpillar tunnels are colder. They're narrower. They're only 12 feet wide, 12 to 14 feet wide. We do radishes, tatsoi, sweet salad, turnips, pea shoots, a lot of head lettuce actually, kale, a lot of salad mix, both salanova and direct sown salad mix, and bok choy and Chinese cabbage. So those are the greens that we have in the tunnels. We do not have particularly harsh winters here. I'd say Jersey is like a pretty mild growing climate. So we'll get weeks where it's in single digits for a few days at a time, but not at night. During the daytime and those cold snaps, we're usually getting up into the 20s outside. And the big tunnels heat up pretty well. And we'll throw, 3 layers of row cover over things if we need to get them through those time periods. But generally, we're only talking about maybe January, February, where that's going to happen. And it's only going to be a few tough weeks to get through. So it's just not really, in this climate, it is not a disaster to not have the heat in the tunnels.
You must have to have a very flexible harvest schedule then in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
So is that create problems for your being able to get to your farmer's market with enough product? How does that affect it?
That hasn't been too bad as long as we're looking at the forecast when we decide when we're going to harvest. If the day before markets, if our normal scheduled harvest day is supposed to be 25 and cloudy, we know that we have to harvest in the days before that. One thing about winter produce that we always struggle with going into the spring and summer, winter produce seems to hold really well. So if we harvest it, wash it up, pack it on into our walk-in cooler, there's not going to be any kind of quality difference if we've harvested it 1 or 2 days before we might normally for a market. So we just plan around the weather for when we harvest, and we do other farm projects on what would have been the harvest day.
Do you have any mechanical harvesting going on, or is it all hand?
It's pretty much all hand. I look with envy at the people who are harvesting with like the quick cut greens harvester. I cannot say that our greens plantings are usually that uniform to be able to do that, or that they don't have like, some gross stuff towards the bottom that we need to be able to cut above or make micro adjustments with. So harvesting is pretty much all by hand.
So yeah, so that's a lot of hand harvesting of spinach, for instance.
Yeah, it's such a pain in the butt. Yeah.
I mean, what percentage is spinach then of those tunnels?
Yeah, so I'm always better with knowing the sales number for this stuff.
Yeah, go for it. Whatever you
Yeah,
have.
so in the winter months, spinach is a full 10% of our sales.
Okay.
There's actually there's a number of things that are 10%. So like head lettuce, 10%, spinach, 10%, kale, 10%, salad mix, 10%. So, those crops, that's 40% of our winter sales. So spinach is a lot of the sales. I don't think we're selling it cheap. I think we make it make sense. It's also, winter spinach is delicious. People are so happy to have it.
Yeah, and hand harvested too. I mean, it's a
Right.
lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
And then what would be the other 50 or 60% of your sales after those crops?
Yeah, so one thing that's, good to note is that the like fresh green crops in the winter, that's about 75% of our sales between, let's say, December and to the end of April, which is, when we're really more heavily relying on tunnels or winter crops. But 25% is storage crops too. So we don't grow any root crops. Well, I guess radishes and the sweet salad turnips are technically a root crop, but we don't grow storage root crops in the winter. We grow them now. Our fall storage crops are being seeded right now. And then we store them in our coolers on the farm and just pull them out and wash them. So that stuff, that's already in the bag by the time we get into the winter. But those other greens, we do microgreens, arugula, that stuff, it gets into like the 4% of sales, 3% of sales, those sort of numbers. Yep.
So the storage crops, what do those include? You said carrots, potatoes. Do you have a larger diversity than that, or?
Yeah, so we also do beets and garlic, roasting turnips, kohlrabi, watermelon, radishes. Carrots are really the big thing. So carrots are 16% of our winter sales. Carrots are pretty big.
And do you find that in order to be a popular, booth at a farmer's market, you really need to have that sort of diversity of product, both fresh and storage?
That is what I was advised on when getting started. And we just always have had that diversity, but I can't say that I think it's necessarily true. We just have never tried not having diversity. Demand is really high in the winter. I bet people would be happy to buy salad mix from somebody who just had salad mix.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is nice, though, to offer more just for if someone's going to come. They usually don't want to have to shop at multiple stands. So it is nice to be able to be like the one-stop shop for a customer.
Yeah, for our ordering system, like for people who are going to pre-order, I think we in particular need to be able to, I think if somebody logged on and saw we only had 5 things, they might just not place an order. So there's definitely that for the pre-ordering. For the farmers market sales, I kind of bet that a lot of our customers sort of rejoice in spreading their money around to different vendors. So I'm not sure at the farmers market that it matters. So our CSA members often find us because they are farmers market customers too. So I think the real thing might be, though, is that if I'm going to be sitting at a farmer's market, whether or not I am selling salad mix or I am selling salad mix plus 20 other things, I am going to have to sit my butt down. Not actually, we don't let people sit at farmers markets, but I'm going to have to be at the farmer's market for that 4, 5, 6 hours. And if you're selling more types of things, it is more worth your time as a marketing strategy to be there. So there's lots of reason to try to sell lots of different things. It's the money, basically. The money is the reason to do that. Yeah.
So what do you typically have leftover product at the end of the markets? What do you deal with that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So many customers ask about that too. So it's really important to have your good answer ready. In the winter, we often sell out of the greens. So we rarely have leftover greens at the end of the market. In the summertime, we plan to have leftover greens. We intend to have produced more than we will sell because it is our business strategy to flood the retail market. You just make sure we are fully getting all those retail dollars so that we never have to wholesale. So we do end up with leftovers, especially with the 6 different markets. We've got leftovers from 6 different markets. And there is an organization in our area called Rolling Harvest Food Rescue that will just come and pick it all up. And then they do all of the organizational work for finding out which soup kitchens, which food pantries, which individual households that are food insecure need it and what they need. And they don't just work with our farm, they work with many farms in central Jersey and in like the Bucks County, PA area. So they're pretty fantastic.
Do you have any sort of gleaning initiative that comes to the farm as well to glean crops, or is it just based on your leftovers?
It's mostly based on our leftovers, but Rolling Harvest will do gleaning. So that same organization will organize like corporate volunteers, school group, church group volunteers to go to farms for gleanings. They are basically like on hand, on call when they get a phone call from a farm to be able to do that.
It's great that you have that organization that can pick up your farmers market leftovers, because I know that that can create a lot of stress for farmers, especially small scale farmers that don't want to have waste. And that's a great win-win situation for everyone, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's really awesome. It's really awesome. I so appreciate that they do all of that coordinating work, because that's a whole nother job for somebody on a farm to figure out how to get leftover food that is still good, perhaps not marketable, but could really be nourishing somebody onto their plate. And they totally take on all the aspects of that. They're fantastic.
Hey, podcast listeners, we're going to pause for a moment to hear from one of our show sponsors. Today's show is also brought to you by Tunnel Vision Hoops. Tunnel Vision Hoops designs and manufactures do-it-yourself high tunnels, hoop houses, and greenhouses. With an extensive array of products to help large and small growers become more productive, they have 11 different tunnel widths to fit any application and designs to stand up to weather conditions from coast to coast. Tunnel Vision is also a national distributor of parts and accessories needed to build, maintain, or upgrade an existing tunnel or hoop house. Check out their Tunnel Vision Hoops YouTube channel for instructional how-to videos to help build a great high tunnel or hoop house. Here at Four Season Farm, we have 2 movable high tunnels made by Tunnel Vision Hoops, and they are definitely my favorites. To learn more, visit their website at tunnelvisionhoops.com. Now, back to the show. Well, what would you say then are the biggest challenges then to winter growing for your operation?
Mm-hmm. Probably the actual market part, because the markets are cold. And just keeping our vegetables in safe but appealing state at market. So not frozen vegetables on the table.
How do you do it?
Yeah, how can you even do it? So if it's like bad enough out there, we preheat the box truck before we have it leave in the morning. So that's actually made a pretty big difference if we just put a space heater in the back of the box truck, so that the floors and the walls of the box truck are warmed up a little bit and any of the contents in there. Then when we unpack things from the cooler, we put them in the box truck and cover them with blankets so that on their way to market, they are not going to freeze on the way to the market. We will use very large coolers that we'll put the greens out into on the table, and then just have like a sample bunch or bag of what it is in front of the cooler. People can ask for it then. This is all worst case scenario stuff. If we have to do this, we will do this. since we started the online ordering, we've been able to also just ping customers with an email saying, why don't you pre-order for the market this week so we can keep it safe for you until you pick it up. So that's actually been pretty helpful as a strategy. And then where there are markets with electricity, setting up like the little chicken heat lamps over top of the vegetables, that can help a whole lot too. We've only done that a couple times. Most places just don't have the electricity to be able to do it. But that is another strategy that we have used. I think the worst market I ever worked, I kept everything in the box truck and just clipped the signs of what we had onto the table and then just really hawked it, yelling out to customers cheerfully what we had available, because that's not the most appealing market setup for sure. But really, like, that's what all the meat vendors are having to do every week. So I can do it too.
Yeah, I remember in early days in Colorado, I was always so envious of the meat farmers because it was cold and their meat was frozen.
Right. It's like perfect.
It was a perfect environment for them to be outside, with frozen product. But
yeah,
us, on the other hand, not so much.
No, it gets pretty tough. The online, I think we could do even more with the online ordering and pushing that for the winter markets, because it is really a nice way to keep the produce in good shape.
Yeah. No. Now, are there just no indoor spaces available? What sort of, why aren't there indoor winter markets in your area?
We'll have to see what happens next year. There were indoor winter markets.
So this is just since COVID.
This is COVID.
Got
it. There were some indoors, and that was really nice. I think by next year we'll probably be seeing that return. We even were part of like pressuring our market managers not to go indoors this last year because I didn't think customers would want to. And frankly, our staff did not want to go indoors for markets this winter. And I would have never made anybody work an indoor market in a pandemic if they didn't want to.
Yeah. I mean, it's up here in Maine. We had an indoor winter market that was inside a nursery greenhouse that wasn't being used in the winter months. And it was a great market because you went inside this greenhouse and had all these vendors and product and everything was, warm enough to sell. But with the pandemic, that got canceled and we shifted our sales just to wholesale to the local grocery stores and restaurants. But if you didn't have that, I can imagine that must have been a huge stressor to figure out how to sell your products then easily.
Yeah. Luckily, people still came to the outdoor winter markets this last year. Also, we had a cold winter. I don't really want to tell you how cold because you'll tell me I'm a wuss. But for us, it was cold and it was snowy. and it's an ask to have your customers come out to a farmer's market any week anyway. That is amazing of them to work that into their weekly schedule. But to ask them to do it in a snowstorm, whole different level. But they did it. They came to market in this cold winter. I really appreciated that.
Well, and so are there any other disadvantages you'd say to, the winter production? Like, maybe we should back up and say, what are the advantages that keep you going?
Yeah, so the reason I started doing it was because there wasn't a lot of winter growing going on in this area when I started the farm in 2010. So it was a way to distinguish myself from other farmers in the area and build a market following. What became apparent as the years went on is that it was also a way to keep your customers in the habit of buying from you year round. So rather than, the farmers market closing in November and then they don't see you again until May, they've seen you that whole time. So when you're in the middle of the summer bounty, they're already in the habit of being with you then. So customer retention is pretty big. But probably the biggest thing is to be able to offer work hours year round to our crew here. That would be, for me, the number one reason to grow in the winter.
Is most of your employees, do they live locally in the area? Do any of them reside on the farm?
Nobody lives on the farm. Everybody lives locally in the area. We don't anymore do apprenticeship style employment. We have people who work here. And Most of the people who work here are in charge of something on the farm too. So it's almost like you look around and everybody is a manager here. And I think I would go nuts if I had to do as much retraining yearly now as I did when I started the farm, just with an overturning transient workforce. It's really the number one strength at Chickadee Creek is that people who work here have skin in the game here. We have very open finances on the farm. So people who work here are really aware of what we're making and where it's going and like what their path would be to make more money if they choose to. And being able to work through the whole year is just that's what adults need. and we really like hiring adults. So yeah, so that's the number one reason for growing in the winter. I think I would have a hard time having such a rapid switch from all in all summer and then nothing to do in the winter. For me, that would not mentally be a great state of affairs. So we slow down in the winter, but we're still on a schedule where we get out of bed every day and like do the stuff, and that feels important for my mental health.
So I read that you had twins recently. So how has that change affected the business and the farm and everything else?
Yeah, it's been interesting. So they're two now. I have a little boy and a little girl that are 2 years old. So they were born in 2019. They were also born really prematurely. So they were more than 3 months early. And it required that I was like really in an emergency way out for the count at the end of June for that farming season. And even when I was physically able to be back at the farm, I was pumping for 2 babies. So I was producing breast milk as basically a full-time job, plus trying to spend lots of time in the hospital with them before they got out of the joint. And I should say, in case anybody is worried, they are totally fine. Despite like being born at 2 pounds each, they are little power. Yeah, they were really small. They were micro preemies. We were so fortunate that they were extremely healthy, even at 2 pounds each, and they're great. They're fantastic. But when I found out I was having twins, I basically immediately let go of any of those ideas of like carrying the baby around with me while farming. And I think for me that might have been helpful. I think I would have unhealthfully expected a lot of myself as a farmer and a mother and would have tried to do everything. But when I found I was having 2 freaking babies, I was like, well, that's not going to work. That is actually not possible anymore. So rethink it. Like it's not gonna. So I was really glad I had that space involved in it, in having 2 at once instead of having 1, and following the mythology that you could just strap the baby on and get to work. Because I don't think that would have worked either. I think I just would have been more likely to feel crappy about it. Yeah, because they're little kids. You can't put them out on a 90-degree day on your back. It's really mean to do that. So I was immediately removed from the farm when I had them and got to immediately see that the farm was just fine without me there. I still stayed very involved in like helping make ToDo lists and like troubleshooting labor shortages and, figuring out what hours people needed to work. So I still remained pretty involved in management, I guess I would say. And I don't think the crew that was here would have been unable to do that without me. I think they probably would have been fine, but that was a way that I could remain helpful and like take things off of people's plates.
And I'm sure make you feel like you're still part of the farm, which is you need to feel that sense of purpose too outside of.
Right. That's a tough part of, so after the kids were like out of the hospital and we're home, the following 6 months was just eaten alive by them. They took all of the time for that next 6 months. And that was really, really difficult for me because I had previously basically just worked every day on the farm for the 10 years before that. And not necessarily because of the farm struggling. I just really wanted to do it. This is my thing. So I worked a lot and then suddenly was still working a lot, but just in my house.
Yeah. Yeah.
With these two little squirmers. Yeah, that was really, really difficult. And now what my schedule is like and has basically remained like since the beginning of the 2020 growing season is that I am with my kids 2 days a week, 2 full days. I'm not on the farm at all those days. And then I farm the other 5 days a week. But I go home, I leave the farm at 5 o'clock on the days that I work, so that I'm home to have dinner with them and put them to bed, spend a little time with them. And then if I need to go back after they're asleep, I go back after they're asleep. They have an early bedtime.
Yeah. Well, it's important that you can create those boundaries around work, family, life, all of that. It's really hard to do on a farm, especially because there's so many gray areas as to what is your life, what is work especially if you live on a farm too. And so you do live off the farm property. So it sounds like that natural, departure can help with that too.
Yeah, we do live off the farm. I've actually I fantasize about living on the farm one day if I can buy it. But my husband Kevin he's not too into the idea, frankly, because he knows that that's what would happen. And he's a smart guy.
He knows you well.
I think he knows I would drag them all into it. It wouldn't just be me; it would be him and Helen and Brendan. And it's okay for it to be a job. It's okay to love your job, but it's okay for it to be a job.
Well, that sounds very healthy. Well, let's switch over to our lightning round questions. First question is, what gets you up in the morning?
The screaming babies get me up in the morning. But if there wasn't that, the screaming babies, I'm a morning person and I am excited about what we're going to get done in the day. So I guess the tangible motivation of getting some farming done is what does it for me.
What's the hardest part of farming for you?
Employee management, hands down. I am not a natural born leader or a natural born manager of people. I can get mad and frustrated, and I do not have a poker face. So when that happens, people know about it. So I have to say sorry. And it's been something where I've had to actively, read books on management and listen to people and take advice to get better at it. But I think managing people is tough. And a lot of the folks who work here are pretty similar in age to me. So there's a peer feeling and the feeling that I would like to be people's friends as well. So not being a natural born manager and wanting caring deeply about doing it well and fairly and wanting people to like me, that's all really tricky stuff. It's impossible to hit it 100% all the time. So that's the hardest part for me.
Yeah. Well, considering one of your employees actually recommended you and spoke very highly of you for the show, sounds to me like you're doing pretty well. So next question, what's your favorite tool?
Excel spreadsheets. So just Microsoft Excel. It's how the entire farm is organized, is with Excel spreadsheets. And it's just the right level of technology for us. It doesn't need to be more fancy and more complicated than an Excel spreadsheet. This does it. And it's easy to train other people to use them. So that's it. That's how, this time of year, I don't necessarily even know what we're supposed to be doing next week. We're on autopilot and just sticking to whatever the Excel spreadsheet told us to do on a given day.
So that's all your to-do lists, your crop planning, your sowing, your harvesting, everything is all on Excel.
Yeah, I guess I should walk back a little bit. So it's really the crop planning and the seeding schedule is all on Excel. And we also use Excel for our data analysis at the end of the year to figure out how we're going to tweak things. Selling online has been pretty great for that, to be honest, because we can extrapolate the online sales to all the in-person sales to create averages for what things did. And it makes that analysis and tweaking of the crop plan for the next year much faster. But the to-do lists, I have a folder on the farm laptop that has all the to-do lists from the last 12 years. And those are just Word documents. Our to-do lists week to week, everybody on the farm gets one. And they have the work schedule for everybody on them. They have the 10-day weather forecast graph on them. And they have a farm map with the field names on the map on them. And then the text changes just based off of it takes about 1 hour to do the to-do list per week. It's after a field walk on Sunday, then I've got the to-do list done. But I also will reference the previous year ones too. But all of our harvesting, that's the harvest week to week. It's an Excel spreadsheet that just gets updated with everybody's market requests for that week.
I laughed earlier just because when you said you had this, folder on your laptop with Word docs. I love to-do lists, and I have a very similar folder on my computer with, just to do, and then it lists everything out. I mean, it's so helpful and so handy, and I love being able to reference it year to year too. So
yeah, that was actually really important when I left for maternity stuff. Like the folks that were going to be on the farm, they knew where all of these documents were. So it was just, if other people had to be making the to-do list, they could look at what we did that week for the previous years and make sure that they weren't missing anything. It's really helpful. Like that level of organization, I think, is nice for the crew.
What is your favorite way to relax or self-care activity?
So I am super shitty at self-care. Gonna admit that one. I suspect I need less than some people do to be, happy. But I love reading. I really love reading nonfiction, just nerdy stuff. I like reading medical mystery stuff. I'm reading a book about insects right now. I really like reading books about natural history. So mostly reading, and I try to do it every day before I go to bed. It's the way that I wind down and let my mind play with some other concepts other than, the daily absorbing ones about kids eating their dinner and plants getting in the ground.
What's your favorite smell and your least favorite smell on the farm?
I think my favorite smell is actually our walk-in cooler this time of year. After a full harvest day. So it's been packed up with so many different vegetables. So many of them are really fragrant, just delicious. You walk in there and you are inspired to eat. It's a really good smell. It's like a conglomerate smell of a lot of different things, scallions and mints and cucumbers, and it's just delicious. And my least favorite smell is fish emulsion after it's been sitting for a few days mixed with water. Yeah, hands down, least favorite smell. That's disgusting.
Yeah. What do you love besides farming?
I love ecology and field biology. I love identifying trees and plants and birds and reptiles and amphibians. So that's what I went to school for, and I still really love that stuff. I'll get really excited about a new insect or, a bird that I don't normally see somewhere. We had the cicada brood X this year in Jersey, and that was just, I thought it was heaven. It was amazing to see all of these cicadas. So cool. So I love that kind of stuff. I will get overjoyed when we find a tree frog in the kale. So it's really nice to be working outside and on a diversified farm where there's a lot of different crops to foster lots of animal life, because I get to see this stuff frequently, and it's just a blast.
What's one piece of advice you wish you had starting out, or something you wish you'd done differently?
Mm-hmm. So I really frequently quote my mentor farmer because he's a genius. So Jim Kinsel from Honeybrook. And I wonder how scary it is for Jim that I think I remember everything he ever said to me. But a couple of things he was saying when he learned I was going to be starting my own farm after only 2 years of working on his farm, I think he looked a little panicked. And he said, well, once you start, you will never be able to stop and go learn again. You're just going to be doing it then. So maybe learn a little first. And he was right. I think that in a lot of cases, there's other factors going on for when you start your business, aside from you being ready to start the business that are in play. But that's totally, people should really think about that. I think I could have probably saved a lot of money basically by learning more first. I understand why I started when I did because of the opportunity on the land, but it wasn't a great idea in terms of things getting off to a smooth start. And then the other thing he said that I just wish I had used to be less hard on myself. He said that there's so many different things you have to do as a farm business owner, that you cannot be good at all of them. So you cannot be good at fixing a tractor and putting up a fence and managing employees and projecting your sales and doing the accounting. And I don't think that's just farming. I think that's business, small business management. But it is really hard to not be good at the things when you care about doing them well, so hard, you really care. And I think it's only recently, especially with the kids in my life, that I've been backing off of needing to feel like that stuff all gets done perfectly, because it's not possible. You can't do all that stuff well. So just getting used to, I would recommend that people get used to the idea that they're not going to do a good job at everything and finding some peace with that. Motivated people who want to start their own businesses are generally not okay with not doing things well. But it's going to be a shit show, and it's just better to understand that you're going to have a lot of stuff that doesn't go well, and that you cannot do well. And it's not because you're bad at anything; it's because you don't have time to do everything well.
Yeah, good advice. How often do you speak with? Did you say his name is Jim?
Yeah, Jim.
How often do you
Jim Kinsel.
Do you still speak with him? Are you able to connect with him, these days too?
Yeah, I'd say a couple times a year, and sometimes it's just a quick text. He's still farming. He's still really busy, and I don't want to assume that Jim wants me to monopolize his time either. But this last winter, we were at a farm liquidation auction at the same time, and it was just so great to be able to see him and talk to him for a little bit while we were both also working, trying to scoop up some equipment and materials. I would say I can be really grateful for him answering the questions that I've had through the years, getting me going in farming. And I try to not take up too much of his time, given that I know how much advice he has graciously doled out through time.
Yeah. Well, it's so important to have those mentors and that sort of touchstone to help you to, remember that you're doing just fine.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What is your learning edge, and where do you feel like your abilities or understanding as a farmer could grow?
Every year I am more and more aware of what I don't know out here. And a lot of it has to do with getting down to soil chemistry and plant nutrition chemistry. So that's that. I think for me, that's the next frontier, and what I started to delve into with conferences this winter. I hope conferences remain virtual forevermore, frankly, because I could do sessions right after a farmer's market. I thought it was great. Not that people don't want to get together and see each other, but I can't do that at this point in my life.
And not as a 4-season farmer either, because they're all in the winter when we're farming.
Right. I know it's not so easy. So I hope the virtual component really sticks around, because I really loved taking like some crop nutrition budgeting sessions this winter, some like financial sessions. I really got inspired by a soluble salt session that I went to through PASA, and it like we delved right into that with our tunnels and like discovered where we had an issue, came up with a plan, flushed out the salts, and like are able to avoid making the mistakes in our new tunnels that we made in our old tunnels. So it's really like the chemistry part of farming. Not that like the ecology isn't extremely important, but it seems to me, especially in tunnels, the longer you are farming there, your little mistakes build up so much because you have removed a lot of the ecology from these stationary tunnels. So you better just be paying attention to the chemistry.
Yeah. Or get movables if you don't live in a wind tunnel, it sounds like.
I know. Yeah. Our neighbors had a movable tunnel and they had 2 of them and they moved when they weren't supposed to. So I'm totally scarred by that.
Yeah. How do you relate to that which is out of your control?
I feel pretty freed up by the things that are not in my control. Like I often feel like I know how to prepare for things to the extent that I can prepare for things. And some of that is just having been farming for a little while, not a ton of time, but 12 years. So I feel like I have a general understanding of where preparation can bring you. But there are so many things that you're just on the ride for. And when something goes wrong and there's nothing I could have done about it, I don't have a lot of feelings about that. It's just like that happened. That's just something that happened. And I don't love that moment between something bad happening and before you've made the plan for what your response is. But like that's the thing you can do. You can make your plan for the response, but that's all you can do. So I'm pretty much, I'm kind of okay with it. When we had the plastic rip off of 2 of our high tunnels 2 weeks ago, in just the worst storm we've ever had. We also just got hammered by hail. And after the storm, I was sort of shaken up because I was out in it and it was scary. But I didn't really have feelings about like, oh man, that really set us back. Look how much money we lost from that, because that was just something that happened. And yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Well, sounds healthy to me.
Yeah.
And last question, how will you grow old farming?
With more tractors. No, I'm a pretty big fan of mechanization. I'm also a big fan of retirement plans and financially planning to not do it forever. The business is organized as an S Corp and the business is able to have employee ownership as part of it. And I am always up for there are several people who have worked here who have the invitation to become employee owners. One way of saying it is that I am up for one thing, using more mechanization as I get older and as the crew here gets older. 2, letting people buy in to or like earn into the level of responsibility that they feel capable to. And 3, financially plan to not have to farm forever. That's my exit strategy.
What would your retirement look like, though?
Oh, yeah, I'd still want to farm.
Okay.
But not maybe not at the physical level that I'm currently doing. So I'm like a pretty good tractor operator, and I'm also a pretty good mechanic. So I am available for doing those things. I guess I would also say I don't know what my kids want to do one day, but if they I would be up for just helping them with their thing one day. I had a lot of help from people getting started, and just feels like a great thing for starting to help somebody get going in whatever their thing, even if it's not farming. I could be helpful.
I'm sure you could be a great mentor to a new farmer someday. So, well, good. Well, thank you so much, Jess. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Those are really kind words. I appreciate that so much. And it was great to talk to you. I love talking about this. So really fantastic way to spend an hour. Thank you.
Yeah. And good luck with your garlic harvest. I know you're in the middle of that.
I bet it wrapped up while we were talking. I bet they finished up.
Well, good. Well, that's even better. You have a really good crew.
Oh, they're amazing. They're amazing. Yeah.
Today's show was produced by me, Clara Coleman, with support from No-Till Growers. Special thank you to Willie Breeding for the theme music. Thank you to the patrons at patreon.com/no-till-growers for helping to make this show possible. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
So last March, when all of the shit started to hit the fan, can I curse on your podcast, Clara?
I guess we'll see if it gets edited out.
Okay.
I don't mind, personally.
I have a slight case of sailor mouth, so I can try to curb it in.
I mean, I don't personally mind, and that's the beauty of editing. So,
yeah.